Dylan Storey now stares into space. Thanks very much to the Auckland Stardome Observatory. Morning, Dylan.
Morning, Ramo.
How you doing this morning?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Have we learnt any more about what's happening with Phobos, the Phobos space mission that we talked about last week that was going awry?
Well, that's the Phobos-Grunt Russian mission, which is off to the Mars moon, except it's not because its second stage rocket booster didn't fire. And so the operators were giving themselves a couple of weeks to reboot the computers to get it to work before it misses its opportunity to fly to Mars. And the answer is no, they haven't managed to fix it yet. But it's gone into safe mode, so similar to the way I guess your computer goes into safe mode, where it's got some self-determination capabilities.
Yeah.
But what they're finding, because it was stuck in low Earth orbit, and what they're finding is that the orbit is being periodically boosted slightly. So that shows that some rocket booster is firing, but it's not being boosted as much as if the proper booster that was supposed to fire had. So the theory they've come up with is that somehow its self-sufficiency mode is firing its turning thrusters to somehow keep it out of low Earth orbit.
So it's smart enough to detect that it is declining.
Possibly, yeah, or possibly it's just some random glitch that's firing these steering motors. So the effect that's happening is it's buying more time because it's getting into a higher orbit, so it's taking longer before it falls down to Earth. However, the window of opportunity to get to Mars, as Earth and Mars' relative orbit, as Earth sort of passes Mars, that is the end of November, basically. So unless they can establish communication and fire those main thrusters by the end of November, then the mission's all over.
So essentially it's turning into a very expensive mistake.
Oh, extremely, and really gutting, because it was going to be such a great mission, going to return a sample from a Mars moon, something really bold, really, really adventurous, never been done before, and a big plus for the Russian space program, who's had a series of failures in interplanetary probes in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a real bummer. But, still they might get in touch with it and it might go off and complete its mission, but it doesn't look good.
Okay, fingers crossed. Well, back here on Earth, in Auckland City, the Auckland Stardome Observatory took a couple of great photos of Jupiter this week.
Yeah, so I was down there on Wednesday night, and amazing views of Jupiter at the moment. It's really bright, it's really high in the sky, and we were looking at Jupiter through the telescope. I was there with the telescope operator Kevin James Ning, and he took these photos, which you're showing on the screen now for online viewers, of Jupiter. He just took them through his iPhone, where he put the camera up to the telescope lens, and he's got this technique where he somehow gets it right.
Yeah.
And it turned out really great. You can see the cloud bands on Jupiter. You can see the stripes. And in some of the photos you can see some of the moons.
Wow.
Through the telescope you could see all 4 Galilean moons really brightly. But they don't quite come out on camera so well because of the light level differences.
Well, that's really cool. And I've had that experience of seeing like Saturn's rings from the Auckland Stardome Observatory, and it is something to behold, to be able to see it yourself through a telescope, rather than on a picture or anything like that. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing, and it's really cool taking the public through it and taking people. And then you see this light in the sky that just looks like any other star, and people are going, "Oh yeah, that's Jupiter, is it? Oh yeah, that's interesting." And then they see it through the telescope, and it's sort of this wow moment.
But I hear the Stardome is looking at flogging off some telescopes. Is that right?
Yeah, Stardome sells telescopes, so they're having a telescope viewing evening with view to selling, and that's on November the 29th at 8 p.m, where you can go along and have a look through exactly the same telescopes that we took these photos through, and we'll be displaying they'll be displaying some shop models too, and it's 10% off telescopes for people attending that night.
That's cool.
So Stardome Observatory, check out the website stardome.org.nz.
Okay, we're just getting back to Jupiter stuff though. looking at some hidden Great Lakes on one of the moons.
One of the moons of Jupiter, which is one of these dots, one of these lights that you can see around Jupiter through the telescope, the second closest, it's long been thought that underneath the ice surface that there is a big underground ocean, and this raised the possibility of, if there's water, there must be a heat source. There'd be a heat source from inside the moon. So water and a source of heat, exactly the same conditions as we have on Earth at the bottom of the Atlantic Trench, where of course we find life at the volcanic vents. So could there be life under the surface of Europa? Well, it's long been a question to be explored, but recently a team of scientists has come up with an explanation for some of the surface features we see on Europa, which is called chaos terrain, where basically you've got all these irregularly shaped sort of chunks of material placed in the surface, and the way they explain it is by something having been disturbed, say the surface having been disturbed, say by it being hit by something, and some of the ice melting, some of the big chunks then sort of tumbling to irregular positions, and then the water freezing around them, so they get sort of frozen like that in the ice. So this model scientifically explains the surface terrain we see on Europa, and this basically points to the possibility of underground lakes which are near the surface, so much nearer the surface than the underground sea would be. So this essentially has the effect of increasing the chance that there could be life there underneath the surface, because increase the chance of flow of nutrients between the surface and the underground sea.
Yeah. And why the big long lines on the moon? You can see there's just crisscross of what seem to be random lines. Well, what are they?
Well, yeah, it's an odd shape, the surface, odd patterns on the surface of Europa. So it is frozen ice. Spectroscopic observations have shown that it's water ice, and it's frozen because space is very cold.
Yeah.
And so when the Galileo probes first took these photos of Europa, they thought, what could be causing this terrain? So coming back to, where do we see terrain like this? Where do we see patterns like this on Earth? It's basically in Arctic or Antarctic places where there is ice surface but with free-flowing water underneath.
Yeah.
Is that water underneath that causes these patterns? So that was one of the pieces of evidence that leads to believe that there is an underground ocean on Jupiter. So it's caused by the water underneath, the ice floating on top. Something happened to sort of push bits of ice up, and then the water, because it's floating, and then it freezing in position like that. So it's basically you get big plates of ice floating, sort of drifting into each other, and the ridges freezing in place.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, as you say, it does look like the terrain you might find in the Arctic or Antarctic in some places. Interesting stuff.
In some places, yeah. So not where it's ice that goes all the way down, but where there's ice with water underneath.
Water. You can go, of course, and see Jupiter through the telescope with your own naked eye at the Auckland Stardom Observatory, and continue the conversation with Dylan as well perhaps on Twitter, twitter.com/Dylan Storey. Thanks very much, Dylan.
Thanks, Wemo.